Hi, so this is week 2 price controls by Kathleen Stevens. I made this little presentation to go along with this video here. Um, so if price controls lead to adverse effects, then why are they justifiable? So I decided to make a little chart here explaining the definitions just to start us off. So adverse means preventing success or development. And price controls are a government regulation establishing a maximum price or a minimum price to be charged for specified goods and services, especially during periods of inflation or war. Rules of prices. Rules of prices. So the price is the initial amount, and it can be affected by the quantity demanded, the quantity supplied, and the supply and demand. A lot of this is very simple. It just seems like a lot. And sometimes there's government action, which is the price controls. So when the prices aren't at a good rate or the suppliers aren't producing goods that should be at a certain price, then the government will step in. Or if suppliers cannot produce a certain product at a good price and the consumer cannot afford a certain resource that is needed, then the governments can take action in creating those price controls. So here we have this lovely little chart that shows the inflation in the United States, and over here it says 2020, and the inflation is looking pretty high there, and it hasn't been that high in the US since 1882, which is a very long period of time. So this just goes to show how important things like inflation and knowledge of economics can be, because right now we're in a period of inflation, which has led many people to, call upon the government asking to impose price controls. I'm just gonna open my speaker's notes a little bit. And so as such, controls have significant costs that increase with their duration and breadth. So price controls are the best at a limited amount of time. And so these price controls can allocate scarce resources that are needed, because there's all these things that as humans we just need to survive. And if we don't have those things, X, Y, and Z, that demand will still be there whether or not people can afford that. So price controls distort signals, leading to inefficient allocation of goods and services. Inappropriate policies can reduce inflation without the costs imposed by price controls. So price controls aren't always the answer. So a little bit more about price controls. Minimums are called price floors, and then the maximums are called price ceilings. So an example of a minimum price control is the minimum wage. And that is not imposed during a time of inflation or war. That's just a policy for just like the well-being and of the whole country, because if there was no minimum wage, then most likely people would be exploited, and people would be working hours without getting paid the amount that they should. So whether or not there's a minimum wage, people should be getting paid a solid amount for the work that they are putting into any type of job. And so in some countries, since they don't have minimum wage, people are overworked in terrible conditions and aren't even getting paid I don't even know, like a 16th of what Americans get paid for in the United States. So it is a really significant thing that I feel like a lot of people in this country don't necessarily take, you know, people don't really see as how nice it is to have, you know? And that reminds me of there's a lot of companies that will start their company in other places in the world because they don't have minimum wage, so they can pay their workers for like $0 and still make the same products, and then they're ending up making a huge profit and exploiting their workers, which is completely terrible. So minimum wage is super, super important. And over a long period of time, price controls can lead to problems such as shortages, rationing, inferior product quality, and illegal markets. So, like I'm saying, good and bad here. So price controls like minimum wage in drugs and price controls on drugs like insulin are really good for the consumer. So insulin is something that many people need to survive. And so if there was no maximum or price ceiling for that, people would be paying anything that the supplier would have made, because people just no matter if they can afford it or not, they need it to survive. So the product owners could really abuse their power in that sense, but thanks to this price ceiling, they can't. But insulin is still very, very expensive. So governments may also set price limits on goods and services if they feel that the products or the consumers are just not benefiting from the products being sold. And this allows companies to remain competitive, and it eliminates a lot of monopolies, which is very good for the consumer. So is this justifiable? Governments can intervene and set price controls to prevent suppliers from continuing to raise prices, allowing competitors to enter the market and crush monopolies that exploit consumers. So at the end of the day, there's always a supply and demand, but sometimes when there's monopolies, suppliers can really take advantage of the consumer. Especially if it's a resource that consumers depend on. Price controls can be both good and bad. They help make certain goods and services such as food and housing more affordable. They help corporations by eliminating monopolies, opening up markets to more competition, and it may lead to shortages. It may lead to an overabundance of supplies, underground markets, and a decrease in the quality of goods and services available in the market. So those are like the positives and the negatives to the price controls. And when price controls are put on some products, the companies can't afford to make the product at such a high quality. So the initial quality of a product can go down, which is bad for the consumer in some ways. But at the end of the day, price controls like minimum wage and the price controls on drugs like insulin are really important for the consumer. And price controls have been around for a very, very long time, since the Egyptians. So as long as governments are making right decisions when they're using these price controls, then we'll be good. And this is a little quote. Ooh, where did that come from? My bad. Why is this all important? So, economic life and all its ramifications is of profound ethical significance. This is so because of scarcity, which gives rise to conflict, because of the independence, which creates mutual obligations, because of the wide range of values sought through economic activity, and because of the significance for human life of the economic process itself. So, that was in our book by Stapleford. And this just shows how important it is to understand economics in every aspect of your life, because it can lead to such conflicts, because at the end of the day, there's all these things that as humans we need. And so if we're not able to get these resources, it can lead to, some arguments, some conflicts, and that is not something that as a nation we want to deal with. Yeah, and so here are my wonderful references. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed the video.